Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is John, and today we are talking about Clint Eastwood's incredible gift to a small-town school. In this video, we will explore how a simple letter from a dedicated teacher led to a life-changing opportunity for dozens of students and revealed a side of Clint Eastwood that few people ever get to see. In a world where celebrity stories often revolve around red carpets, blockbuster premieres, and social media headlines, some of the most remarkable acts of generosity happen quietly. No cameras, no publicity campaign, no carefully crafted public relations strategy. Sometimes the most powerful stories begin with a single handwritten letter. This story starts far from Hollywood, far from movie studios, far from the glamorous image most people associate with the entertainment industry. It begins in a small Montana town surrounded by mountains, forests, and long stretches of open road. A place where opportunities often seemed limited. A place where dreams sometimes felt much larger than reality. And at the center of this story was a teacher who refused to stop believing in her students. For 15 years, Sarah Mitchell had taught English and film studies at Whitefish High School. Teaching was more than a profession to her. It was a mission. Every morning she walked into the classroom, determined to help young people discover possibilities beyond the boundaries of their small town. Many of her students came from families that had struggled financially for generations. Some worked part-time jobs before school, others helped support their households after class. Many carried responsibilities that most teenagers in larger cities could barely imagine. Yet despite these challenges, Sarah constantly saw creativity in her students. She saw future writers, future directors, future editors, future storytellers. The problem was that her students rarely saw those possibilities themselves. They looked at Hollywood the way someone might look at another planet. Interesting, fascinating, but completely unreachable. When Sarah introduced classic films in class, students became deeply engaged. Stories opened their imaginations. Movies transported them into worlds they had never experienced. For a few hours, they could dream beyond their circumstances. Among the filmmakers they studied, one name always captured attention: Clint Eastwood. His career fascinated the students, not only because he was a successful actor, not only because he directed award-winning films, but because his story represented persistence, discipline, hard work, qualities they respected. As Sarah guided discussions about filmmaking, students often became animated. They debated scenes, analyzed characters, discussed directing choices, examined storytelling techniques. For a little while, the limitations of their environment disappeared. Then reality returned. As graduation approached in the spring of 2016, Sarah began noticing a troubling pattern. Students who once spoke enthusiastically about creative careers had started giving up before they even tried. One afternoon after class, a student stayed behind. His name was Marcus. He loved writing stories. His notebooks were filled with ideas for films and television projects. Yet that day, he looked defeated. "None of this matters," he told Sarah. She looked up from her desk. "What do you mean?" Marcus shrugged. "I'm never going to make it in that world." "Why would you say that?" "Because people like me don't get opportunities like that." Sarah immediately recognized the pain behind those words. She had heard similar comments before, but now they seemed to be spreading throughout the class. Another student wanted to work with cameras. Another dreamed of editing movies. Another hoped to become a director. Yet one by one they had started convincing themselves that their dreams were unrealistic. Not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked passion, because they lacked belief. And belief can be one of the hardest things to hold on to when you've never seen someone from your background succeed. Sarah understood that feeling better than most. She had grown up in rural Montana herself. She remembered standing in small classrooms wondering if the wider world would ever open its doors. She remembered questioning whether opportunities belonged only to people born in the right cities, the right families, the right circumstances. Those memories stayed with her, and they made her determined to fight for her students. One evening after school, she sat alone in her classroom. The building was quiet. The hallways were empty. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Stacks of papers covered her desk. She should have been grading assignments. Instead, she kept thinking about her students, 32 young people, 32 dreams, 32 futures hanging in the balance. Then an unusual idea entered her mind. At first, it seemed ridiculous, completely unrealistic. The kind of idea sensible people immediately dismiss. Yet the more she thought about it, the more she couldn't let it go. What if she reached out directly to Clint Eastwood? Not for money, not for publicity, not for favors, just for advice, a message, a few words of encouragement, something she could share with students who needed hope. The idea sounded impossible. After all, Clint Eastwood was one of the most recognizable figures in Hollywood history. Why would someone like that respond to a teacher from a tiny Montana town? Still, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day she bought a notebook. Then she began writing. The first draft felt awkward. She threw it away. The second draft sounded too formal. She threw that away too. She wanted the letter to feel honest, personal, sincere. Eventually, she started over. This time she simply told the truth. She described her students. She described their talent. She described their doubts. She explained how difficult it was to convince young people that their dreams mattered when they had never seen proof. Most importantly, she explained why she was writing. She wasn't asking for charity. She wasn't asking for financial support. She wasn't asking for celebrity attention. She was asking for perspective, a few sentences, a few words, anything that might inspire students to believe in themselves. When she finished writing, she read the letter several times. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. She folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope, addressed it to Clint Eastwood's production company. Then she mailed it. Afterward, she returned to her normal routine. Classes continued. Assignments piled up. Students prepared for graduation. Days turned into weeks. Eventually, Sarah assumed nothing would come of the letter, and honestly, she expected that. People in Hollywood probably received thousands of letters every year. Most likely her letter would never even reach Clint Eastwood. If it did, perhaps an assistant would send a polite response. That would be enough. At least she had tried. Weeks passed. Life moved forward. Then everything changed. On a quiet afternoon in May, Sarah sat alone in her classroom grading essays. The school day had ended. Most students had already gone home. Her phone suddenly rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. Normally she ignored unknown callers. For some reason she answered. "Hello?" a professional voice responded. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes. My name is Jennifer Cole. I'm calling regarding a letter you sent to Mr. Clint Eastwood." For a moment, Sarah thought she had misheard. Her heart immediately started pounding. The room seemed to go silent. Every sound disappeared. Only the voice on the phone remained. Jennifer explained that Clint Eastwood had personally read the letter. Not once, multiple times. Sarah struggled to process what she was hearing. Then Jennifer said something even more surprising. "Mr. Eastwood would like to speak with you." Sarah froze. She genuinely didn't know what to say. Before she could gather her thoughts, another voice came onto the line, a voice she instantly recognized, deep, calm, unmistakable. "Sarah?" It was Clint Eastwood. For several seconds she couldn't speak. She later admitted that she completely forgot everything she planned to say. The legendary actor and filmmaker had actually called her, and he had read her letter. What happened next would become the beginning of a story that nobody in Whitefish, Montana could have imagined. Not the students, not the teachers, not the town itself. Because Clint Eastwood wasn't calling simply to offer advice. He had something much bigger in mind, something that would transform the future of an entire generation of young filmmakers. And within a matter of weeks, trucks would begin rolling into Whitefish carrying equipment, professionals, and opportunities unlike anything the school had ever seen. The students had asked whether dreams like theirs were possible. Very soon they were about to receive an answer none of them would ever forget. The days following that phone call felt almost unreal for Sarah Mitchell. Several times she found herself wondering whether the conversation had actually happened. She replayed every word in her mind. The calm voice, the questions about her students, the unexpected promise, and most importantly, the commitment Clint Eastwood had made before ending the call. Get those kids ready to work. At first, Sarah struggled to explain the situation to school administrators. The story sounded too unbelievable. A Hollywood legend had personally called. A professional film team was coming. Equipment was being delivered. A workshop was being organized. It sounded more like a movie plot than reality. Even the principal looked skeptical, until official emails began arriving. Then phone calls, then schedules, then shipping documents. Slowly, the impossible became undeniable. Something extraordinary was coming to Whitefish High School. Word spread quickly. Students whispered about it in hallways. Parents discussed it at local stores. Teachers exchanged excited conversations during lunch breaks. Yet many students remained cautious. They had learned not to expect miracles. Disappointment often followed hope. So instead of celebrating, many simply waited. 3 weeks later, the waiting ended. Early Monday morning, the quiet streets of Whitefish became unusually busy. Residents noticed large vehicles entering town. People stopped what they were doing to watch. 3 trucks eventually pulled into the high school parking lot. Students gathered near classroom windows. Teachers stepped outside. Parents arrived with cameras. No one wanted to miss what happened next. The truck doors opened. Inside was equipment most students had only seen in professional studios. High-end cameras, lighting systems, sound recording equipment, editing stations, production gear, cases filled with tools used on real film sets. For a moment, nobody moved. The students simply stared. Many had spent years watching behind-the-scenes videos online. Now the same equipment stood directly in front of them. The dream suddenly felt tangible. Then came another surprise. Professional filmmakers stepped out of the vehicles. These were not social media influencers, not motivational speakers, not celebrities looking for publicity. These were experienced industry professionals who had worked on major productions, people whose names appeared in movie credits, people who actually made films for a living. Leading the group was cinematographer Rachel Chen. She wasted no time with introductions. She gathered the students together and looked directly at them. "Mr. Eastwood sent us here for one reason," she said. "He believes talent exists in this room." The students exchanged uncertain glances. Many had never heard someone say that about them. Rachel continued. "But belief alone isn't enough." Her tone became serious. "For the next week, you're going to work harder than you ever have before. You'll make mistakes. You'll get frustrated. You'll want to quit. That's normal." She paused. "But by the end of this week, you're going to create something real." Those words changed the atmosphere immediately. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a gift wrapped in compliments. It was an opportunity tied to responsibility. And the students responded. The first day focused on fundamentals: camera operation, composition, lighting, audio recording, production planning. Everything moved quickly. Students who had only watched tutorials online suddenly found themselves holding professional equipment. At first, many were nervous, afraid to touch anything, afraid of making mistakes. Rachel quickly eliminated that fear. "Equipment can be repaired," she told them. "Confidence is harder to rebuild. Use it." The students laughed. The tension eased. Learning accelerated. By the second day, the classroom had transformed into something entirely different. Students were no longer acting like spectators. They were acting like filmmakers. Teams formed naturally. Writers gravitated towards storytelling. Technically minded students focused on cameras. Creative problem solvers stepped into directing roles. Editors began organizing footage. Everyone discovered strengths they hadn't fully recognized before. Marcus, the student who once believed Hollywood was impossible, emerged as one of the strongest writers. His ideas impressed even the visiting professionals. Emma displayed remarkable instincts behind a camera. Rachel noticed immediately. After watching Emma frame several shots, she smiled. "Who taught you that?" Emma looked confused. "Nobody." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I thought." Moments like that began happening everywhere. Students who doubted themselves started receiving validation from real industry experts. Not empty encouragement, professional respect, and that made all the difference. As the week continued, a screenplay slowly took shape. The story centered on a young person growing up in a small town while wrestling with dreams of a larger future. The subject felt deeply personal. Every student contributed ideas. Every student saw pieces of themselves reflected in the narrative. Soon, the project received a title: The Distance Home. The name resonated with everyone involved because in many ways, the film mirrored their own lives. They understood distance, not just physical distance, emotional distance, the distance between where they were and where they hoped to be, the distance between dreams and reality, the distance between fear and possibility. Once the script was completed, production began. Suddenly the pace intensified. Long days became even longer. Early mornings blended into late nights. Students carried equipment across town, filmed scenes in local businesses, recorded dialogue outdoors, solved technical problems, adapted to unexpected challenges. Every obstacle became a lesson. Sometimes scenes failed completely. Sometimes audio recordings were unusable. Sometimes weather disrupted schedules. But instead of giving up, the students learned how professionals respond. They adapted, improvised, continued moving forward. Rachel constantly reminded them of something Clint Eastwood had emphasized. Perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. That philosophy became the foundation of the entire project. By midweek, exhaustion started appearing. Students were tired. Teachers were tired. Even the professionals felt the pace. Yet nobody wanted to stop. Momentum had taken over. Every completed scene increased confidence. Every solved problem created excitement. Every success made the next challenge feel achievable. For the first time, many students could actually imagine themselves working in the film industry. Not because someone told them they could, because they were already doing it. That realization changed everything. Sarah watched the transformation with amazement. The same students who once spoke with resignation now discussed careers with excitement. Conversations sounded different. Dreams sounded different. The future sounded different. The workshop was accomplishing something much larger than filmmaking. It was rebuilding belief, and that belief was spreading throughout the community. Parents volunteered, local businesses offered support, residents opened locations for filming. The entire town became invested in the project. What started as a letter was turning into a movement. Still, the most important moments were happening quietly. A student discovering confidence, a teenager realizing talent matters more than background. A young filmmaker understanding that opportunity sometimes arrives unexpectedly. Those invisible changes would ultimately matter far more than any equipment or training. Because cameras can be purchased, software can be installed, skills can be taught. But belief can change an entire life. And by the end of that remarkable week, belief was exactly what those students were beginning to find. Little did they know, however, that Clint Eastwood's involvement was only beginning. The workshop would end. The film would be completed. The applause would eventually fade. But the impact of his decision, and the opportunities still waiting ahead, would reach far beyond anything Sarah Mitchell or her students could imagine. What happened next would influence lives for years to come and create a legacy that extended far beyond a single film project in a small Montana town. By Friday evening, Whitefish High School had become the center of attention for the entire community. What began as an ambitious one-week workshop was now about to face its biggest test. The premiere of The Distance Home. Students who had spent months doubting themselves were suddenly preparing to show their work to hundreds of people. Nervous energy filled the theater. Families arrived early. Teachers filled entire rows. Local residents lined up outside. Many had followed the project from the moment the trucks first rolled into town. Now they wanted to see the result. Backstage, the students could barely stand still. Some worried the audience would dislike the film. Others feared mistakes they might have missed during editing. Sarah Mitchell walked among them, offering encouragement. Yet even she felt emotional. Only a few months earlier, many of these young people had convinced themselves their dreams were unrealistic. Now they were about to watch a film they had created themselves. When the lights finally dimmed, silence settled across the theater. The screen illuminated. The opening scene appeared. For the next 15 minutes, the audience watched something much bigger than a student project. They watched confidence being born. They watched creativity finding a voice. They watched young people proving to themselves that they were capable of far more than they had imagined. As the final credits rolled, the theater remained silent for a moment. Then the applause began. A few people stood, then dozens more. Within seconds, the entire audience was on its feet. Students looked at one another in disbelief. Some laughed, others cried. Many did both. The standing ovation felt like confirmation of something they desperately needed to hear. Their work mattered, their talent mattered, their dreams mattered. For most people, that would have been the end of the story. A successful workshop, a memorable premiere, a wonderful experience. But Clint Eastwood saw things differently. He understood that inspiration alone doesn't change lives. Opportunity does. The equipment remained at Whitefish High School. The cameras stayed. The editing system stayed. The lighting gear stayed. Suddenly, The school possessed resources it had never imagined owning. Yet an even bigger surprise was waiting. Over the following years, Clint quietly expanded his support. Each year, professionals returned to mentor new students. Each year, new films were produced. Each year, another group of young people discovered possibilities they had never considered before. The program grew steadily. Students who once believed success belonged only to people in major cities began earning recognition for their work. College applications improved. Creative portfolios expanded. Confidence increased. Then came the scholarships. Most people never knew they existed. There were no public announcements, no media campaigns, no grand ceremonies. Students simply began receiving acceptance letters from film schools accompanied by unexpected financial support. Tuition assistance, educational funding, life-changing opportunities. Many recipients had no idea where the help originated. Some assumed anonymous donors were involved. Others believed it came from educational foundations. Only later did they learn the truth. Behind the scenes, Clint Eastwood had created a pathway for talented students who were willing to work hard. He wasn't interested in publicity. He wasn't looking for praise. He simply wanted obstacles removed. Years passed. The results became impossible to ignore. Students who once doubted themselves entered film schools across America. Some became editors. Others became cinematographers. Some entered screenwriting programs. Others pursued production careers. The dreams that once seemed impossible slowly became reality. Marcus, who had written stories on his phone because he couldn't afford a computer, eventually saw his creative work gain professional attention. Emma pursued cinematography and built a career behind the camera. Jamie developed editing skills that opened doors to major productions. And they were not alone. Many students followed similar paths. Each success story became proof that talent had always existed in Whitefish. What had been missing was opportunity. As the years passed, Sarah Mitchell continued teaching. Every new class heard the story, not as a fairy tale, not as a miracle, but as evidence that one person can create enormous change simply by believing in others. Eventually, Sarah retired after decades of service. Former students traveled from across the country to celebrate her career. Some came from New York, others from Los Angeles. Many returned from places they once thought they would never see. They gathered not only to honor a teacher, but also to recognize the woman whose letter started everything. During the celebration, a special video message appeared on screen. It came from Clint Eastwood. In the message, he thanked Sarah for refusing to give up on her students. He spoke about the importance of teachers, the importance of mentorship, the importance of creating opportunities rather than simply talking about them. Those who attended later described the moment as unforgettable because it revealed the heart of the entire story. This had never been about Hollywood. It had never been about fame. It had never been about publicity. It was about belief. One teacher believed in 32 students. One filmmaker believed in one teacher. And that chain of belief changed lives. Today, the impact continues. New students enter the program each year. New projects are created. New dreams take shape. Many may never fully understand how it all began, but the lesson remains. Sometimes a single letter can change everything. Sometimes the smallest action creates the greatest ripple effect. And sometimes the people who make the biggest difference are the ones who never ask for recognition. Clint Eastwood could have sent an autograph. He could have mailed a short note. He could have offered a few encouraging words and moved on. Instead, he chose action. He chose investment. He chose to create opportunities that would continue long after the headlines faded. That decision transformed futures. And perhaps that's the real message behind this story. Talent can be found anywhere. Dreams can be born anywhere. Potential exists in every town, every classroom, and every community. What changes lives is the moment someone decides to believe in that potential and help it grow. For Sarah Mitchell, it started with a letter. For 32 students, it started with a chance. And for everyone who hears this story, it serves as a reminder that even the smallest act of faith in another person can create results that last for generations. Sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't what we achieve for ourselves. It's what we help others achieve long after we're gone. And that is why this story continues to inspire people today.